In addition to our guest speakers today, let me introduce you to a few other people on our team. Casey Clayton is our program lead. Kim Snyder is our benefits coordinator. Kim works with you on scheduling briefings and workshops. She sends out our monthly newsletter content and ensures that your questions are answered as you submit them into our program. Lastly, our You Already Own It executive or sponsor is Steve Winters, our Executive Vice President of Business Development and Delivery. Feel free to reach out and get in touch with us. Our email address is on the screen there. You already own it at goplanet.com if you have questions. As we go throughout the presentation today, though, please feel free to raise your hand. You can put your questions in the chat as well, and we're definitely going to allow time for questions at the end. But use those emoticons if you hear something you like, and share your feedback with us as we go throughout the presentation today. We do record these sessions, so we'll provide that recording. And let's go ahead and start that recording now. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Mature Your Microsoft 365 E5 Investment, 5 Underused Purview Security and Compliance Capabilities. This session is going to focus on helping organizations get more value out of Microsoft 365 E5. With me today is our guest speaker, Dennis Guzzi from Microsoft. He's a Senior Director of Security, Compliance, and Identity. Welcome, Dennis. For more information about today's program, you can check out our blog that we published earlier in the week. And at the end of the presentation, we'll also have a collection of useful links based on the topics that we have talked about here today. So let's get into it. Here's our agenda. We're going to start talking about E5 from an overview perspective. We'll share some of the features that we commonly see customers leveraging right out of the gate normally as E5 customers. And then we're going to talk about some of those underused features of purview and security and compliance. And we'll dig into what those 5 features are that we're going to highlight today. And Dennis will walk through that and provide a lot of great information. After that, we're going to talk briefly about some licensing changes and enhancements that's coming in July. We've mentioned it before in our program. We're going to recap that again today. July is coming up pretty quick. And then we'll allow time for questions for sure at the end. Now, while we are mentioning E5 today, we understand that not all of our customers, maybe have an E5 SKU. You may be a government customer with G5 or an academic with A5, but the features we're going to talk about today should have parity across all of those different SKUs. So when we mention E5, just know that. Let's start off with a poll question here. What percentage of your E5 security and compliance features do you think your organization actually uses? So that poll's going to go up. Just take a minute when you get a chance there. We'd love to gather some feedback on what you feel you're using from an E5 perspective inside of your organization. We'll leave that poll up for a couple of minutes for you. One of the things that I'm going to show here in just a second is this website, M365maps.com, is actually built and maintained by a Microsoft resource, and that's been a part of doing that for a number of years. It's a very helpful site. If you don't use it, it's a great way to get a snapshot of the SKU from an M365 perspective, from the licenses that you have. And I'll demonstrate that site. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is a great tool and a way to dig into some of those features and capabilities. There's just a lot of depth, especially in that E5 SKU, and a lot of things packed in there. So it'll help and provide a really good visual reference, really, that maps out those different license tiers. So I'll show you that here in just a second. From that map, I pulled in some of the ones that features within E5 that we see customers leveraging pretty quickly as they move maybe from E3 to E5. Office 365 Cloud App Security is one. Power BI Pro included for all E5 users. That's a big one, and including in E5 really saves organizations a lot of money. Having those analytics capabilities with Power BI Pro. Teams phone and audio conferencing is another, and then a few of those security and compliance related capabilities, privileged identity management, risk-based conditional access reviews. Those are common ones that we see organizations generally already have turned on. We have a lot of conversations with customers from a Microsoft 365 perspective, and these are just some of the ones that we see organizations leveraging rather quickly. And then the ones that we're going to really focus in on today is Audit and e-discovery premium, insider risk, adaptive protection, Teams DLP, message encryption, advanced message encryption, and communication compliance as well. So I think you're going to get a lot out of that. You're going to find, hopefully some things you didn't realize about those capabilities and how they can really bring value to your organization. So let me share that website real quick so you see what that looks like when you go to m365maps.com. It is updated on a regular basis. So depending on the type of license you have, you can come onto the site. For example, if you want to see what E5 includes, you can click on that and you can zoom in and out. You can move this map around so that you can drill in. The capabilities today really is all encompassed from an E5 perspective inside of this purple box here. The good thing that I like about this is that you can really hone in on, does my E5 include adaptive protection? Well, there it is, right? And you can click on any box inside of this map, and these are live, so it goes to a live link. So if you want to know about adaptive protection and what is that, insider risk, you can click on it, another tab opens, and will take you to whatever that feature is, and you can learn more about it. So I really like this website, and hopefully you can leverage it on your own within your own organization and find that a valuable tool as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, then I'll pull the deck back up because I want Dennis to jump in here and share about kind of what he does at Microsoft and the perspective that he brings, and then he'll really get into the meat of the content. So welcome, Dennis.
Thank you. I don't see slides yet. Not sure if they're coming up.
Let me drop and reshare it. 1 second. Try that again.
The joys of technology.
Mm-hmm. All right, should be coming out now, looks like.
All right, I have nothing, but we might have to.
Yeah, we can go back to
Run with running with it if we. So I can't see the slides. That's okay. I do 3 shows a night. I can adjust anything there.
I'm going to go and share on my screen, Dennis, and then you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if you can go to the You Already Own It slide, and we'll kick off. So while that slide's coming up, first I appreciate everybody giving me a few minutes to talk to you today. My name's Dennis Guzzi, as was mentioned. I've been at Microsoft 18 and a half years. I've been helping our customers deliver cloud solutions in something called BPOS, Business Productivity Online Suite, which is just a nice way of me saying I've been doing this a while and I'm really old. Over the next little bit of time, I'm going to talk to you today about 5 different Microsoft Purview capabilities that I really believe every customer that's on this call, that listens to this call, really is probably either underutilizing or really needs to know more about. The thing that I love about these You Already Own It conversations is that my purpose on this call here isn't to try to sell you something. It's really to focus on those conversations where there's no upsell, there's no SKU, there's no procurement cycle. It's just about getting in and using the technology. So if we can go to the next slide. So as was mentioned, I'm really going to talk about a couple different capabilities. But here's the reality. Every week, when I talk to customers, when the team that I lead talks to customers, the average activation rate for Purview compliance capabilities is well below 50%. Now, that doesn't mean that the product isn't working well. It means the rollout isn't finished for most customers. The licenses are active, the data connectors are flowing. What's missing is ownership. Who's configuring the policy? Who's reviewing the alerts? Who closes the loop with HR or legal or security when one of those alerts fires off? The 3 numbers on the right capture really what we're going to talk about in this session today. 5 capabilities that I'm going to talk to you about activating today. For most of you, if not all of you, 0 new licenses that are required to enable them. And at the end of it, when we get to the end of the session, we're going to talk about 90 days to really make a measurable shift inside of your environment and really get that compliance posture increased. And my little tagline on there, you bought it, let's make it earn its keep. You know, you invested in Microsoft, you partnered with Microsoft. Let's make sure you're getting value out of that. So if we can go to the next slide. What are the 5 topics we're going to talk about? So in order today, insider risk management paired with adaptive protection, e-discovery premium and audit, communication compliance, data loss prevention in Teams, and advanced message encryption. Now, these are amazing features in the product. They are also 5 of the features and capabilities that potentially have some of the highest level of value, but that are often the least early activated inside of a deployment. So what I'm going to do is for each one of them, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to explain what it does. I'm going to show you how it fits into the workflow that you and your teams can run. And I'm going to give you 3 specific action items. So at the end, I'm going to try to tie it all together with a 30, 60, 90-day plan. So let's start with one that has in my opinion, the biggest gap between owned and activated, and that's insider risk management. So if we can go to that next slide, please. So topic 1, insider risk management with adaptive protection. And the reason I'm starting here is because this capability really has that biggest gap between what customers own and what they actually have running. Almost every E5 customer on this call, if you have, again, assuming you have E5, most of you, if not all of you do, you have this license. What I'm betting is a small minority of you actually have this capability in production. So when people when people hear about insider risk, they're usually thinking of the disgruntled employee, the person walking out with some top secret files or customer lists or, ultra protected data or IP or information. And look, that happens. I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't. And of course, IRM catches it. But by volume, in fact, the overwhelming majority of incidents fall into one of these 3 buckets. First is rushed sharing. There's pressure at the end of a quarter, there's a deal close, and there's some action that's taking place, and somebody says, I need this done right now, right now, right now. So they'll share something externally with edit rights instead of without edit rights because it was quicker to get the file out. Second is convenient workarounds. People will use personal OneDrive or Gmail or some unmanaged, device that they've got because there's less restrictions, less controls, and they're just trying to get things done. The third is really misunderstanding sensitivity. So you might have a data classification policy that you want to abide by, but somebody misunderstands the taxonomy around what something means compared, from confidential to general and public. We at Microsoft have this happen all the time where our default policies are very strict. In fact, I put together these slides, shared them with Andrew. Predictably, what did Andrew do? Send me an email saying, can't open them. And even though these were meant for this, this webinar, this conversation that we're having, I forgot to make it where they were accessible to him. They were tagged highly confidential, Microsoft eyes only, when in reality, I'm presenting them to you today. So I'm a victim of doing this myself where I didn't even catch the classification. So IRM is built around the reality. It's looking for patterns, exfiltration sequences, abnormal download volumes, departing users, activity, the privacy controls that your reviewers need to have, their behavior, not the individual. So as we go to that next slide, this is where it gets powerful. When you pair detection with adaptive response. And if we, when we look at the signals and we look at the flow of this process and we look at the adaptive protection aspect, The reason why we want to take that 20 to 30 minutes to enable this is signals. IRM ingest the file, email, device, cloud, identity from all these different sources, from M365, from Defender, from Entra. You don't have to build anything. It's built into the solution. So the signals are all there. They're already built in to what it is you're doing. The risk indicators, these are the patterns that your policies are going to look for. So a departing user downloading a file from SharePoint, sensitivity labeled content going, to a personal cloud, something like a Gmail or a Google Drive. Other anomalies that are done, like, again, in the different internal file shares. Step 3 is risk level. So each user is getting a dynamic risk level based on their activity: minor, moderate, elevated. It's not a score on a dashboard that somebody reads. It's a living attribute. So as you are engaging content, building things, interacting with data inside the environment, this is a living attribute that's applied to each person. Stage 4, and this is honestly where I think this capability earns its keep. The risk level automatically adjusts purview and Entra controls. So an elevated risk user can be moved to a stricter policy, for example, requiring reauthentication or being blocked from labeling content a certain way without somebody in the middle, without a person. So instead of that automated aspect, it requires some sort of human interaction. So, and when their behavior normalizes, when they are operating in a less risky way, the controls relax. So that's the shift when you think about this. Static policy, same rules for everyone forever. Adaptive, living, it scales because the system's constantly doing the fine tune. And that brings me to the 3 things that I want you to check on this week. When you walk away from this session, I want you to, 1, turn on the HR connector and publish the out-of-the-box data theft by departing users policy. This single move catches the most common exfiltration scenarios, and it's a template that you just simply enable. 2, turn on adaptive protection with the default risk levels. Nothing customized, nothing fancy. You don't need to handcraft risk levels on day 1. The defaults are very calibrated. Wire it to your existing DLP policy and just let it iterate. 3, and this is a people problem. It's not a technology problem. Publish your reviewer workflow in writing. Who reviews alerts? What goes to HR? What goes to legal? Where's the privacy boundary inside the organization? If you do nothing else, doing number 3, and the reason that is I've seen some fantastic IRM rollouts stall for 2, 3, 6 months because no one knew who was supposed to triage the alerts. At the end of the day, from an ownership perspective, compliance admins and your security leads typically jointly manage this process. The effort is in these things that I just asked you to do is usually very low. There's also really typically no new licensing that's required to do it. So let's move into another capability that you lean on when something has already happened, which is e-discovery and audit. So e-discovery, premium, and audit, these 2 things get lumped together for a specific reason, because you have to lean on both when something's already happened. If there's a suspected leak, a policy violation, a litigation hold, a regulatory inquiry that comes in, the hardest parts of those scenarios typically isn't finding the data, it's building the defensible timeline quickly without breaking some sort of chain of custody. So let's talk about this, the end-to-end workflow, and you're going to see these 6 steps from left to right. So identify. This is custodians and non-custodial sources. The premium capabilities handles both, and critically, it handles Teams chats and Teams channel messages, where a lot, and again, I obviously I'm not inside of each of your orgs, but a lot of modern conversation lives. When you see preserve, this is where we think of the typical legal hold. And this is where, again, at that custodian level across every M365 workload lives. Nothing gets deleted inside the hold scope. When we see collect, automated collection from email, from Teams, from SharePoint, from OneDrive, no manual, PST polls. I, back in the day before joining Microsoft, worked at the Attorney General's office in the Commonwealth of PA. And one of the most frustrating parts of my life was our PST polls from the old Exchange servers that we ran, which took forever and were absolutely nightmarish. That next item that you see up there, process. This is where we get into deduplication, near duplicate detection. So the commonality aspect, email threading. This is where those time savings really start to show up. And then we move into review. This is where, again, usually it's somebody from legal. Sometimes it's from IT, where you start to see things getting tagged, annotated, redacted is obviously is a big one. And it's in that same workspace as as security and compliance. There's not a handoff. There's not something where I'm picking up a package and dropping it elsewhere. And the last one's produce. This is that defensible export with a full chain of custody that's preserved typically for some sort of outside counsel or regulator or some other participant in the legal process. The delta versus standard or manual process, customers I work with typically repeat 40 to 70%, or report to me 40 to 70% less review time on comparable matters when using this process. So one, that's real money when you think of the hours that are invested there. And also that's real risk reduction. And as we move into the next slide here, the capability that makes all of this credible is audit. And so when we talk about audit is the capability that are, in my experience, customers most often underutilize, because it was always on in some form. Really what has changed is the retention options. So what Premium Audit Capture does is it captures those richer signals. When a mail item was accessed, when was a search query initiated, the kind of events that typically in these scenarios actually matter when you're trying to reconstruct what a compromised account saw during a specific window. On retention, the default standard tier is 180 days. Premium gets you a full year by default. If you have regulated scenarios like FINRA or HIPAA, et cetera, the 10-year tier is available as an add-on. Again, I don't know for all of you what your specific requirements are, but certainly that's one of those things. When we talk about retention, we want to be hyper specific about exactly what that long-term retention time is. But the mistake that I see often is this binary thinking. Either everything stays for 180 days or we pay for 10 years on everything. Smart customers tier their retention by scenario. They take advantage of the flexibility that exists. So Mailbox and Teams might be a year for insider risk. Maybe SharePoint's 10 years for regulated workflows. Everything else might be the standard amount of time. So audit plus e-discovery together moves your team from spending 80% of their time on reconstructing timelines to spending 80% of their time on making remediation decisions. So here are the things that I want you to check this week. If we can go to that next slide. So one, verify that Premium Audit is actually on for your licensed user. This is a check. It's not a deployment. This is something where, depending on when your tenant was provisioned and how the license was assigned, it may or may not be enabled by default. So that's one of those things that you should check I should say spot check really in your purview portal. 2, tier your retention scenarios. Pick, you know, 2, 3 use cases: insider risk, legal hold, regulatory. Assign a retention tier to each. Document the rationale. Just again, some of those things that we talked about. This becomes your retention policy on a page. 3, and this is the one that really changes behavior. Run a dry run premium case this month. Pick a closed matter or some hypothetical. Walk through the full workflow. Do it with legal, with security, with records management folks in the room. The first time you run premium in a matter should not be the first time that you actually have to run a, a premium e-discovery and audit action. At the end of the day, what makes this topic and what makes most people most nervous as we transition to the next segment is in my opinion, is communication compliance. So communication compliance is one of those things where you think, you know, in terms of the most interesting of all the topics we were talking about today, even when it was presented, I was like, this is the one that to me is one of the most important and least talked about, because this is the capability that actually makes most people the most nervous. So I'm going to lead with what it is and, you know, what it isn't. It's not employee surveillance. It's not a keystroke locker. It's not a manager reading their team's direct messages or Teams message. What it is a reviewer workflow for handling communications that may violate a policy, harassment, regulated information, conduct risk, with auditable ways to handle that role-based privacy. So when we look and you see what it is, what it detects and the reviewer workflow on the left with what it detects: conduct risk. Is there somebody who is committing harassment, using threatening language, discriminatory language, regulatory information being in the wrong place, material non-public information, trading adjacent language, PHI showing up where it shouldn't be, general policy violations. And by the way, this spans the channels where modern work actually happens: Teams chat and channels, email and exchange, Viva Engage if you're using that. On the right, the workflow. Policy triggers when a flagged message hits the reviewer queue. So here's the part that actually matters the most. The reviewer sees the content with the identity pseudo-anonymized by default. So the reviewer just sees a flagged message from user A, not the name, not the org, until there's a reason to actually unmask. So from there, the triage, you resolve, you close, you notify the user, you escalate to HR or legal, you remove the message. Every decision is logged in an auditable trail. Now, 2 rules for rollout. Never frame this as monitoring. Frame it as consistent, auditable handling. And always pair it with the pseudo, I always mispronounce it, the anonymization aspect of it in writing. So from that end user perspective, seeing that in writing in the combination of what turns the conversation with your works counsel from absolutely not to yes with guardrails. So what are 3 things that I want you to look at this week? If we go to that next slide. So 1, start narrow. Pick one policy so uncontroversial that no sensible person will argue the intent. So offensive language or regulated info in external email. Build trust, expand the usage. 2, do not stand this up without HR or legal, and I should say, and legal, really, and or legal at the table from day one. Always have reviewer roles, escalation paths, unmasking criteria, signed off in writing, typically by both of those parties involved. The governance conversation is going to be longer than the technical conversation, and that's okay. That's really healthy to be doing that. And 3, always run learning mode first. So for 30 days at an absolute minimum, this lets you start tuning the thresholds, validating queue volume, killing false positives. No user should ever be notified by a policy that hasn't been learn mode tested. Do these 3, and communication compliance goes from being the scariest capability in your portfolio to really being one of the most valuable. Next, I want to talk about the gap that opens every time a file moves. Data loss prevention for teams. So data loss prevention for teams, if your DLP story ends at email, you've got a gap. And it's getting bigger every week, every month, every quarter. In most organizations, especially most of the customers that myself and my team work with, Teams is where people share files, paste snippets, drop screenshots, ask, can you send this to a customer quick type questions. If that traffic isn't covered by DLP, you're running a 2-lane policy in a 5-lane world. So the 3 stages that you see up on the screen are the 3 stages in order, and there's a really specific reason for the order. Stage 1, audit mode. Turn on the policy. Change nothing for the user. You're just baselining. What's actually being shared? What data types show up? Which channels are the hotspots? Do that for 30 to 60 days here, minimum. Stage 2, notify and policy tips. This is that just-in-time coaching that's going to show up when a user is interacting with things. So if somebody's about to paste a social security number in the channel, they're going to see a tip that says, it's like Clippy from back in the day, again, I'm aging myself, like, hey, this looks like sensitive data. Consider what this would mean if you're sharing this externally. And they can proceed, they can revise, but this is where the behavior really starts to change for your users. Stage 3 is when you actually enforce. So this is where, when we talk about that high risk, and actually the highest risk data types, payment cards, regulated identifiers, customer lists, this is where you're blocking. And again, each organization, because I know there's any different type of customer on here, from, you know, a customer doing business to government agencies and kind of anything in between, you have kind of that, what's your highest risk data that you need to enforce. So PII or FTI or anything in between. The failure pattern that I see most often here, when security gets frustrated, jumps in and moves straight to block. Help desk explodes, 8 million tickets are getting logged. Someone hears the complaints and says, roll it back, turn it off. So look, these are the 3 actions that I want you to take this week. If we go to that next slide. So 1, do not build a new policy. Take an existing email DLP policy and add Teams as a location. You already have, very likely, a sensible policy that you've implemented for email. Just extend it, don't redesign it. 2, start in audit mode, 30 days at least, no user impact. You pull the audit report weekly, you'll be surprised in probably the first week. But after 4 weeks, you're going to have a pretty clear picture. 3, and this to me is one of the most important ones. Pick 2 data types for enforcement, not 10, 2. Something, virtually every customer has something regulated. So payment types or national ID, you know, like social security number, PHI, something. And then one that I call brand critical. So customer list, pricing, M&A language, whatever is unique to your organization. Those are your stage 3 candidates. Everything else, notify and stays notified. So I've got one more topic of conversation, or one more topic for today in our conversation. And this is the fifth and final one: advanced message encryption. This, in my opinion, of all things, is the closest thing to a pure quick win that you'll get out of this session. So when you talk about what you get in E5, and if you're running E5 and have E5 compliance, you have AME. Most customers I work with have never enabled the scenarios that actually make it interesting. Things like expiring access, revocation, automatic encryption applied to labels. These are 4 capabilities that are worth turning on today. So one, expiring access. You send an encrypted email, access auto terminates after a set number of days. So in sales, if it's quote or proposals, whatever it might be, something time bound from an information perspective. 2, revocation. You send an encrypted email, realize it shouldn't have gone out, or it went to the wrong person. I mean, I work at Microsoft. I can't tell you how many times I've sent the wrong person an email. Now, my name is a little interesting, Dennis Guzzi. There's not a lot of Dennis Guzzis, but there's a lot of James Smiths that work at Microsoft, and or outside of Microsoft. So it's pretty common to inadvertently send something to the wrong person. You can pull back access to the email after sending it, even from external recipients. Try doing that with standard email. 3, recipient restrictions. No forward, no copy, no print. It can be scoped to specific domains or specific identities. 4th, and this is the multiplier, automation. Aligned with sensitivity labels and DLP. Encryption stops being a user decision. A user labels something confidential, external, and the email that is carrying it is automatically encrypted to meet that policy designation. So under deadline pressure, users won't have to remember to say, oh, let me click and encrypt this email or something. If the item that they're including in an email has a label applied, the policy does all the work. So 3 things that I want you to think about doing this week. If you go to that next slide. 1, brand your recipient experience and enable the expiration option. Recipient friction is one of the biggest reasons that encryption adoption stalls out. Having branding on the portal with clear instructions turns a speed bump into a more professional experience. 2, wire an auto encryption rule to a sensitivity label. Pick a label for external shared confidential email. So any email that has this label, automatically encrypted. Typically, that one rule can have massive coverage. And 3, write the revocation playbook for your help desk. When the wrong file goes to the wrong recipient at 5 o'clock on a Friday, the help desk needs some sort of 2-step playbook, not a panicked email chain. It probably takes 30 minutes or less to document and might actually save someone's career. So let's bring it all together. If we go to the one last slide, and I mentioned at the start this idea of 30, 60, 90. I'm a big fan. Anybody who's ever worked with Microsoft, if you've ever interviewed for a role, you are very familiar with this concept of 30, 60, 90. So for me, I love when I talk about this topic around what can I get done in the first 90 days. In the first 30 days, baselines and quick wins, HR connector on, IRM departing user policy published, premium audit verified, DLP extended to teams in auto mode. By the way, all these things that I just was telling you, you can do, even before the week is done. Branded portal, which is surprisingly effective. very little of this is really technical deployment. Most of it is really just configuring things that you already have access to. 31 to 60, this is where you get into that configuration and workflow. Adaptive protections on by defaults. Remember, we had things in audit mode. Now we're going to maybe enforce some things. Communication compliance, standing up. Again, maybe narrowly, maybe still in learning mode. Reviewer and escalation roles written down, not just talked about. You've done a dry run of an e-discovery premium case, and you've brought legal and security together. So the first time you're doing it is not when something is actually going on. You've actually got a little practice in. Lastly, and that's 61 through 90. This is where you start taking all these things that we talked about and you're tuning and enforce. What are your top two DLP data types? Moving from notify to actually blocking. That AME, that auto encryption, wires directly into that sensitivity label. Communication compliance in production, and you're reporting it out. Posture delta from day 0. And day 90, you walk into, if you're the IT person, you walk into leadership with something concrete. Here's these capabilities that are activated. Here's these policies that are in enforcement. When you do that, you're going to have a measurable reduction in insider risk signals. You're going to have defensible investigation workflows and likely 0 new licenses purchased. So this is where I'm going to stop. I know my friends from Planet have some additional thoughts and feedback and some additional information that they wanted to be able to share.
So Dennis, this this is a fantastic plan. I guess my question for you is this. So with many of these types of plans, the biggest thing that we often see that is going to hold us back from a deployment is what's the impact to the end user and what's that experience going to change for that end user? Can you comment on that a little bit? For specifically thinking about these 5 technologies you've talked about.
So remember, many of these capabilities early on, you're enabling in a way in which you are learning about how your users are leveraging these technologies, interacting with content and information that might have certain sort of classification or labeling. So early in the process, from an end user perspective, they have no idea that they are a technology lab rat, if you will. Depending on the different capability, and I talked about it a bit, as I was going through some of the scenarios, there is going to be different direct or indirect user action. So for example, if a user's emailing, is attaching a file to an email, and there's a sensitivity label applied to that email, and the email is going to be automatically encrypted, the end user is doing the same thing that they've done before, but the recipient is now actually receiving an enhanced security experience. So many of these features actually don't require or don't cause additional overhead for the end user. Now, some will. So, and I mentioned you might have scenarios in which you're enforcing some policies and things like Teams, for example. If somebody's going to paste in some type of sensitive information, let's say I was typing in my social security number into a Teams chat. I might, where I didn't before, and I could just type in whatever I want, be it, inflammatory text or social security number or something, that shouldn't be in there. In the past, I could just paste it in and hit send and do whatever I want. Now I'm getting an alert. Hey, this looks like this. Are you sure you want to do that? And depending on the scenario and the way that you've configured the policy, you might allow them to, continue, or you might actually prevent them from doing something. Most of these things that we've talked about really don't have a ton of end user deep direct impact, but some of these policies you probably do want to make sure, especially if you're in a regulated environment. For the first 17 and a half years of my time at Microsoft was either with state and local or federal government. There's a lot of regulatory requirements there. If you're in an environment that's highly regulated, yeah, you're probably going to turn some policies on that a user might have had some flexibility before that, you're going to slow them down a little bit. But for the most part, your end users are going to have no idea that these things are happening in the background. You're just getting the benefit of that enhanced security.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. I think that's really impactful because I, to a great degree, with so many of these having a very little impact on the end user, this is a big win where we can start to enable these technologies without an additional licensing and really help improve our overall compliance posture. So,
yep.
Awesome. Next slide, Andrew. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about some news that's happening on the licensing front. So a couple of really big things that I think are going to be impactful. The first one I want to talk about, and this is a big one, I think, for many of us, and quite honestly, is going to represent an area where we can start to see some significant cost savings, is Microsoft has announced that they'll be moving the Defender for Office 365 Plan 1 into the E3 level suites. So for many of you guys, as you probably knew, this was something that was an E5 level functionality, specifically for Plan 1 and Plan 2. What they'll be doing and changing now is that Plan 1 will move down to E3, Plan 2 will remain at E5. I think, in my personal opinion, this is a big option or big area for most customers to really start to drive some additional cost savings inside of your organizations, start to take advantage of Defender for Office 365, where I may have been spending money on something like Mimecast or Proofpoint or other mail hygiene solutions today. Now I can get Defender for Office 365 included in my existing E3 suite. So I think this is fantastic news. So another key thing that we want to highlight here, and big news here, is that Microsoft is bringing the Microsoft Intune suite into the E5 level functionality. So for those that don't know, the Intune suite is going to extend our capabilities around endpoint management. Specifically, it's going to bring in some capabilities focused around remote help, Intune Advanced Analytics, as well as some of the other capabilities that are around Intune Plan 2. We've got some links for this that we can send out and make available to people. But this is a nice option now where we can build this into our existing components that we already have as part of Intune inside of E5. So great options to be able to expand different ways to where we can better help protect and manage our overall endpoints out there. So one little bit of bad news, there is a small price increase that is coming with E5 on this one that's going into effect around July 1st of 2026. We're expecting about a $3 price increase, but I think quite honestly, that's fairly small in comparison to the technologies and the capabilities they're adding into it. So I think that's a pretty good investment for all of us. So just a couple of things that we wanted to share that are news on the licensing front. So Andrew, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So based on what you've heard today, we'd love to get some feedback here as you think about, what's one thing that you would jump on first here. So you've heard some of these capabilities, and I think it was important the way, Dennis, you laid it out, is it's not just about flipping the switch, right? It's really who's going to be watching, right, after that switch is flipped. There's HR involvement. There's, compliance teams involved, and where are those alerts going. So it's less of a technical, right, and more about how you're driving that organizationally with those policies and things. So based on what you've heard today, answer that poll and give us some feedback on where you think that you may start based on the ones that you've heard today. All right, from a questions perspective, I don't know that we got any others in the chat that hasn't been answered, and we'll give you time to come off mute to ask your question here shortly. We had a couple of questions in advance. One of those was someone had asked about comparing the E and the G suite, so E3, G3, E5, G5 comparisons. I really wish the M365 maps would do that for you, because there's great feature matrix comparisons on that site, but it doesn't include the G SKU. So we'll go back and try to find that comparison chart. And I know that on the Microsoft side, they do publish those at times. So we'll see what we can find and send that out to you. So if you want to email us at the email address you've seen You Already Own It at go-planet.com. We'd love to share what we get for that one. The second one is a question on fine-tuning Intune profiles for CMMC compliance. So we'd love to get some more context on that. And we do have people that can certainly answer those. We work with customers on CMMC compliance and leveraging Intune and M365 tools as well. So we'd love to get some more context so we can answer, and we know who we're going to route it to internally. So if you would email us that question so we have your contact info, send it into the program email, and we'll follow up with you there as well. Let's see, I do see can you discuss auto classifiers in G5? We are going to make this recording available, so that was the second part of this question here. Be on the lookout for the recording and the content that's presented. Dennis or Scott, do you want to talk about auto classifiers? And you're on mute, Dennis.
I'm on mute, duh. We're talking the purview retention labels, so sensitive content types. When we're saying talk about doing it, were we talking about how you do matching, like the keywords, phrases, properties, or like what are the sensitive information types that are out of the box, or like PHI or PII or FTI, or
I was
is
just
there
looking
more?
for a high level, and like the automated pattern matching, and I believe, like, I don't know if this will be in GCC High, but AI powered classifiers.
Yeah, GCC High is a unique environment in terms of the feature function. I think what I'd like to suggest on that one is we get the specific questions, because obviously as you graduate from each level, commercial, GCC High, and there are levels above that. Obviously, there are different features and capabilities. And when you get to the nuance of the individual components, there are times where right down to some of the component levels. So there are, for example, differences between some of the core sensitive information types that are in GCC to GCC High when some of those things change. So like CMMC was just referenced. So when we went from CMMC 1 to CMMC 2, some of the requirements, some of those things take a little bit longer to traverse those environments. GCC High is one where I have a lot of experience, but we would spend 45 minutes talking about.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, got it. We could do it. You could do an entire presentation just on
GCC
auto
High,
classifiers in GCC High.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll find is that, especially when you get into GCC High, the experience or the behaviors are going to be different, because to Dennis's point, some of the sensitive information types are going to differ. Where the trainable or where the automatic classifier is happening, whether or not it's happening, like, for example, within, an on-premise file share, is going to differ quite a bit when you're using the scanners versus if you're actually using, cloud native. So there's definitely some nuances that going to go into that, specifically when we get into GCC High, because the features and functionalities at that, what I'll call sub level, are very different. So
you usually have like CUI policies and things like that users in those environments are more traditionally better connected to than a user in a commercial environment is not thinking about, confidential information in the same way that somebody who is getting a license to something in GCC High. They're usually more in tuned, no pun intended, to like some of those policies and processes. So even on the manual, interdiction aspects from a labeling perspective versus automated, there's a higher level of understanding. So again, I apologize. That's one of those, like, I spent the last 3 years leading the security business for the DoD, so spent way too much time in GCC High and above. So yeah.
No problem.
Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
Appreciate that question. I did mention that we would include a collection of links here. You'll get that when it gets sent out with the presentation. And from a You Already Own It perspective, this is, again, we just want to highlight the available benefits that you have here. I did highlight two of those on this slide. M365 licensing review, that's one that we do very often. And maybe as you listen to some of this today, you're thinking, I'd like to take a look at reviewing what I have and kind of dig into it a little more. That's a way, to have our assistants help do that. The MIP labeling and information protection from a purview perspective, that's another related workshop that we have that we can do with you. So amongst all the others that are 20 plus workshops that you see here on the screen, and I've included a couple of general description slides of what this workshop is. Those couple of workshops, so you'll get that, and we'd love to work through those with you. And you can put in a request through the You Already Own It program, and we can deliver those for you. So there's just a couple of different examples of workshops related to really what we've dug into here today. Our next cloud office hours is going to be May 28th, so mark your calendars for that. And of course, we'll send out information, and you can be on the lookout for May 28th, the fourth Thursday. And then last but not least, we'd love to get feedback on what you thought of today's session. And so we'll throw a poll up there, or you can indicate what you thought of today's session. Your feedback is important. We do these sessions from a You Already Own It perspective, and we really want them to be valuable for you and our community here. So please give us some feedback on that. And we do have 1 minute left, so we'll stay on just a minute if you have any questions for us, but we really appreciate you joining us today. Dennis, again, thanks for joining us, and the content you presented, just a great level of not only explaining what those capabilities were, but really just a practical level of what people can do with that and the value they can get. That's a wrap for this month. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.